Mm, hi, I'm Chris Verfeski, and this is my IndyCar podcast. And my guest today is Stefan Wilson, who is Indy 500 driver, and what is more important, he won a McLaren Autosport BRDC award in 2007. Uh, it's nice to see you, Stefan. How are you today?
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, great to join you here and great to join you on the podcast.
Okay, I've sent you a few questions because you are so interesting person, and I'm just curious, what is your everyday life look like? Because you are driving fast cars on Indy 500. I saw your attempts in long distance races, but what are you doing in your free time? What are your passions? Do you watch any sports?
Yeah, no, right now, everyday life is a little slower than usual. As you can see, I'm wearing this
Yeah.
back brace just because of the injuries I sustained this year in the Indy 500 practice. So yeah, no, I'm recovering from a back injury. So everyday life is pretty slow right now, but typically, you know, it's quite fast paced. There's a lot of travel involved for the work I do, and being in motorsport, whether typically I'm coaching drivers in other series, gentleman drivers in like Ferrari Challenge, for instance, is a series that I coach in. That's sort of the day job, and then that allows me to have the spare time to focus on trying to forward my career and lock in these drives at the Indy 500. And last year I was able to do the Rolex 24 as well, and other events like that. So my goal is still to compete more frequently in IndyCar. And that's just a case of timing and getting the right supporters and the right opportunities coming along. So got to always stay present to try and chase those.
Okay, I didn't expect that you're teaching other drivers. Wow. But I must ask you about IndyCar. Do you watch all the races or just Indy 500?
Yeah, so I watch. Yeah, I mean, I'm a race fan through and through as well as a driver. So like if there's racing on TV, whether that's Le Mans 24, Rolex 24, F1, IndyCar, if I'm at home and the racing is on, then I'll watch it. And last week, was it a week and a half ago, the NASCAR street race, which was really fun to watch as well. So yeah, I'm a fan of all racing. Aside from racing, there's not many other sports that I'm really passionate about. So racing's it.
Okay, just
Racing is life.
okay. I mean, if you watch IndyCar, who is your favorite driver? Because that's the question I must ask.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get to know a lot of the drivers, obviously racing against them at the 500, and the biggest characters in the series. Will Power is hilarious. I mean, just so dry. He's got a really good sense of humor. So really enjoy spending time around him, talking to him. And then outside of that, probably Scott Dixon is the guy I have the biggest amount of respect for. What he's achieved in his career in the series, and he's just an incredible driver. So I think he's probably the guy I look up to the most inside the series.
Nice shots, because I didn't see. I was too young to see first championship of Will Power, but I'm lucky to see his last year's championship. But I will say that again. Good shots, because every weekend I see Will Power. I see Scott Dixon, and I can't imagine that in his age he can be so incredible. So I must agree, he's one of the legends of American sport. But not only that, he's one of the best IndyCar drivers in its all history, which is pretty long. So
yeah,
so nice.
No, especially with Dixon, he's what is he, second on the all-time win list? Like,
Yeah.
that is pretty legendary, and to witness that is pretty cool to see.
Okay, when I was doing a research to this interview, I saw one thing. After winning this McLaren Autosport Award, I saw that the reward was not only cash, but also a driving F1 car. I mean, you are one of these people who are driving McLaren. Which one of these cars was that? Do you remember that or not?
I do, yeah. That was in 2009, and it was the previous year's chassis that I got to drive. So that was the 2008 chassis, I think the MP423, I think, which is what Lewis won the championship with, which was made it even cooler, to be like driving the car that won the World Championship the year before. And it was incredible, like the most crazy experience. Like, you kind of prepare for it, and you're prepared for the downforce and the G-forces in the corners and G-forces under braking, but I wasn't like thinking too much about the acceleration because I've driven lots of fast cars, so it was like, it's going to be fast. Yeah, it's a Formula One car, but that was probably the biggest surprise to me, or biggest shock to me, was just how incredibly fast it was on the acceleration. Which is silly that was the thing that surprised me, but I just overlooked it thinking about all these other things that I was expecting from the car, and then that was the thing that shocked me.
I'm a McLaren fan, so I can even imagine how lucky are you, and how happy I am to hear you that you were shocked. You felt good. You just felt good in this car. Which is one of the most legendary cars in McLaren history.
It was the cool chrome, bright neon orange. That was the coolest era, I think, for the McLaren and Formula One, because that was the year they banned traction control. So that was the only downside, is I was in the rain and there was no traction control, so it's kind of quite sketchy. I was like 18 years old, and I'm like, here's the keys to this Formula One car. I'm like, okay. But it still had all the cool like fins on the car, and I think back and remember those cars very fondly. I think they were probably the coolest looking of the era.
Okay, so speaking about F1 and comparing it to IndyCar, you also drove Dallara DW12 and its evolution to IR18 and this stuff with Aeroscreen. So, what is your favorite car? F1 McLaren or Dallara Evolutions?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, it's not a fair comparison, really. The differences between the two cars are so huge, and just because of the series. So, my favorite car to drive was obviously the McLaren F1 car. But when you compare the design and engineering budget for that car compared to the Indy car, then it's not really a fair fight. But racing the Indy car at the speedway, that's where that car feels the best. It's designed so it can be racing on the road courses and on the ovals as well. And racing the Indy cars at the speedway is the best feeling that I've come across. So.
Okay. I will ask you later about about Indy 500. But please tell me, because you had to move from England to USA when you were pretty young. I mean, you know, for a lot of people, when you are moving from UK to USA, it feels like it's perfect place because you already know the language, but obviously I know that it's not so easy, especially when you are young. So please tell me what are the differences, what was the hardest thing to accommodate for you, and maybe tell me some anecdotes about your family, because your brother was racing driver and your father was also racing driver. So it's a question I knew I must ask you, because I'm curious how is to grow up in such as a specific home.
Yeah, no, so you're right. My dad raced when he was young, back in like the 70s, you know, 60s and 70s. So, you know, I've got a picture of him on the front row of the grid at Alton Park, and in a Formula Ford, and on the outside of the front row was James Hunt. So he was on the inside of the front row. James Hunt was on the outside of the front row, and you know, James Hunt obviously went on to then race in Formula One and win the World Championship. So that's his like shining, my dad's shining moment. He's got it pictured, and he's like, you know, that's his highlight of his career, I think. But you know, so it was just like there was already so much passion for motor racing inside the family, and then you know, Justin was 11 years older than me, so when he got into go-karting and racing at 9, I kind of grew up watching him race, and really that's what, you know, got me interested. Just watching him, cheering him on. That was, to me, you know, that was really special to like witness what he did in the sport and kind of follow him on, you know, and then follow him around. So when I first came to America, when he moved to America to race in IndyCar, you know, originally I'd had these big aspirations to make it to Formula One. Obviously did the Formula One test, but I'd already kind of seen how difficult it is to climb the ladder in Europe. There's, you know, it's just so difficult now. There's so much money and politics involved, and at that time we'd just gone through the financial crisis of 2008, so there was like no interest in people supporting drivers in racing. It was not really a you know, something that was, you know, top of mind in that particular moment in history. So, you know, I saw Justin race in America and decided I wanted to move over here to race on the same circuit in Indy Lights and race on the same weekends and try and make it to IndyCar to race against him. So that became the goal. And you know, my like fondest memories of probably, you know, being able to race on the same weekend, and then we'd both travel to the next race together, you know. So I got to spend a lot more time with him, and you know, probably the most amount of time in my life really that I've been able to spend time with him. So yeah, it was definitely daunting to move from the UK to the US, but it makes it so much easier when you already have people here. And with Justin here, it made my life a lot easier. I think it would have been really difficult to adjust if he had not been, you know.
Okay, thank you for telling me all of that. I must ask next question, because you were talking about trucks, and I mean, you are driving on lots of circuits, and these are legendary circuits. Of course, Indianapolis Motor Speedway or Brands Hatch, but please tell me which track, I know, in karting, in Indy Lights, in Indy 500 or in long distance, which one was your favorite?
I would say from an oval, like from a general race standpoint, then the Indy 500 is at the top of that list. But from a pure joy of driving the track, there's two that really stand out, and that would be Watkins Glen. That was just an amazing track. Every corner just flows. It's high speed. There's a lot of history there. So I'd say Watkins Glen is probably at the top of just pure enjoyment of driving. And then below that, the track that I love to race at the most was Toronto. I got my first win there in Indy Lights, and it just, as a driver, when you reach a track that just suits your driving style and it just clicks with you, and it's a street course, everything about that event was really cool, and I just really enjoyed that race.
Okay, I must ask about Indy 500, because I mean it's one of the biggest races in whole calendar of each year. When I first saw the qualifications to Indy 500, before that I was wondering why they spend time for another weekend just to qualify to race on Sunday. And then I watched this qualifying, and this was the moment when I realized that IndyCar for me is the greatest spectacle in racing, because that was the year I don't remember which year.
Is it when Alonso got bumped, maybe?
Yeah, there was bump day, obviously.
Yeah,
and it was, I was watching Formula One for a longer time, and I really appreciated the Monaco Grand Prix qualifying. But what I saw at the Speedway was something incredible. I never have had a feelings during qualifying like that on this level. I just couldn't imagine that there will be a race or just qualifying before it to which will give me so much emotions. So I was watching this year too. I was watching the front row guys and they record breaking times, and how hard was to you to accomplish this? I mean, is it stressful?
Oh my God. It is the most stressful day of the year for sure. There's just so much on the line, for guys like myself that only have this one race on the calendar. We've spent so much time preparing for it, and in that one day, if things go bad, if you push it too far and lose control or hit the wall, at those speeds, you're going to tear up the car pretty badly. You might even hurt yourself, and that's it. It's done, So you're always kind of like building up to it. You can't afford to leave anything on the table, but you can't afford to go over the line, over the limit, So it is incredibly stressful for the drivers and the teams. And then the track sort of changes throughout the day. The weather's changing. That affects things. You're trying to, precisely predict what sort of downforce drag level you need on the car for the specific conditions, and sometimes you really only get one shot, which is your first run of the day, because then it heats up, and as the temperature gets hotter, it makes it just harder to get that same speed. So there's just a lot of stuff going on in your mind. You're pretty stressed the whole day. That the night's sleep you get on Saturday night, if you've made it into qualifying, is the best night's sleep you get of the year. No doubt about it. You sleep like a baby. But this year we qualified smoothly, so it was no big deal. But as you saw, the people that were in the last row shootout, then it's even more crazy. Like the stress level for those guys, you're getting an hour to qualify, and it's like one shot really, and then with Graham getting knocked out, it was. I mean, you couldn't have scripted it. It was like wild. I can't even imagine for the fans at home. They got their money's worth to see it all play out.
Wow, it's pretty. I'm planning to go to the Indy 500 next year, so
definitely
I'm dreaming of it to see that.
Race day. I mean, the thing that gets you the most. I mean, I've been going to the Speedway for the 500 for like the last 10, 12, 13 years, 14 years actually. Yeah, because I've been there the first year just as a spectator. Justin was racing the 500, and I was just there, and that wasn't part of my calendar or part of my schedule, so I wasn't racing in the Indy Lights race there. I raced there in Indy Lights, and then one year I was a spotter for Justin. So each driver has two spotters, one in turn 1, one in turn 3, and they're just like an extra pair of eyes. So I've been to that race in many different situations, and then obviously as a driver, and like the build up to that day and seeing the amount of people. I mean, it's like a whole community that piles into that track and that racetrack, and it's just like there's not many sporting events I've been to that gives you that kind of atmosphere before the race, and there's just nothing like it. So you got to make it out there. Definitely should be on everyone's bucket list for sure.
Okay. So next question will be about your best year in your career, because as you told me already, your year's calendar is pretty specific. I found that you were third in Indy Lights standings in 211, but I'm pretty curious if it was your best year, or maybe one of Indy 500 appearances.
Yeah, I mean, my career's sort of been very up and down. Like the racing in 2011 in Indy Lights, I was racing against Joseph Newgarden, who's now multi-time IndyCar champion. So me and him were going at it for the for the Indy Lights championship, and he won it, and I finished third. I had to miss a couple of races because I ran out of backing and support. So the following years, my career sort of stalled. I didn't make the jump to IndyCar. I couldn't, and just didn't get the support to make that move. So I just have had to scrape together any kind of racing opportunities I can get and stay patient. And that was probably one of the best years. I mean, I won a couple of races that year in Indy Lights against Joseph, so that was a good accomplishment. But I'm hoping that my best year of racing is still yet to come. I think leading the Indianapolis 500 was a highlight. And that's the sort of goal that I have set for myself, is to try and win that race. So I'll probably get another couple of shots at it, and hopefully I can make it happen.
Okay, let's go back to your debut in IndyCar, because you were driving not only in Speedway, but you did something historical with your brother Justin, because in Baltimore, when you were driving Dale Cohn's car, the other Dale Cohn's car was Justin's, and it was, if I can remember, it was the first time since the 80s of the previous century, after Bettenhausen's, when the brothers were driving the same team, and it wasn't your family team as it was in previous years, you know, in the motorsport history. But it was Dale Cohn, and you were in Baltimore, and there was your brother. I must ask, was his presence helping you, or you felt like this guy is gonna kick my ass?
Yeah, no, it was a cool experience. I was lucky to have that opportunity sort of come up for me. You know, it was a tough. It was a big challenge. I mean, I'd not driven an IndyCar extensively at all. Like I'd done maybe 10 laps about 6 or 7 months before, and then nothing before the weekend. So I was basically learning, you know, the intricacies of an IndyCar on probably one of the toughest street courses in the world. It was so bumpy at Baltimore, so challenging to keep the brakes in good condition, because the brakes were overheating, so you'd have to run less front wing angle to keep good airflow into the brake ducts. So it made it for an interesting car to drive, not particularly set up how I would normally do it. You know, so it was a challenge, but having Justin there, he helped me as much as he could, but he was fourth in the championship, so he had his own race to think about. But for me, it was cool because I got to just sort of overlay my data to his and compare directly to him, and I got to realize just how incredibly good he is. You know, what an amazing driver he was. Because you know, it was really neat to be able to compare those two, compare the data between me and him.
You know, I didn't look at it that you could see how good is your brother, because you had basically a equal car. I didn't think about it, but it must be interesting. You know, your career is all about 500. It's the important part of your life, I think. And I want to talk about 2017 because you already qualified. You were supposed to race this year, and in May, McLaren and Fernando Alonso, they decided to try to find their place in the Indy 500. When I was reading articles about this, I can remember that year because I was watching this race. You know, this whole thing what you did, this was a big gesture. It looks like this because, of course, your name is famous, but Fernando Alonso is double F1 world champion. But you know, I must ask, was it your decision, or maybe, I mean, Roger Penske's or IMS president told you, you know, Stefan, there is a possibility. I mean, what were the how was it look like, really?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it was sort of, it was presented to me as an option, like, hey, yeah, do you want to? We really need this as a sport. Like, you know, you're the last driver to get announced. So, would you be willing to do this? And I wasn't initially, but there was essentially, like, I'm trying to maintain my career, so there was some opportunities presented to me that would allow me to continue, or to get the opportunity again in 2018 to come back and for that opportunity to be better than what I had So it was a mix of both. I could see how it was a big deal. So it was important to the series, and I'm part of the series in effect. If this helps raise the bar, then it helps everyone. So it helps me, and then the opportunities that were presented to help me in 2018 were what was appealing and made it all make sense to me. Because it was definitely a hard decision to make that, but in the end, the opportunity that ended up happening in 2018 was something that really helped me elevate my career and move it forward. Having a really competitive ride with Andretti, and then being able to lead laps at the very end of the race, it was that's something that really boosted my credibility inside the series, I think. So that helped. So in the end, it worked out, and I think it worked out for everyone. Fernando had an amazing experience, clearly, and then from the series standpoint, if you really look at the growth that the series has had, it kind of, to me, it traces back to that, that particular moment. I think the IndyCar series in general is healthier now than it was before Fernando came and drove the 500. The interest level is higher now. So I think it worked out for everyone,
Okay. And year after that, Fernando was bumped. So
yeah.
What an irony.
Yeah, no, it was it was interesting because he stepped into one of the best cars on the grid, so it all felt really nice, and he made it look easy, and I've had the experience of driving for teams and last minute programs where the car's been thrown together. The car's not so nice to drive, and you're like, it's not as easy as that. So it was nice to see him come back and have that difficult experience to show how hard it really is. Not saying it was nice to see him struggle, but it was nice to see him get a taste of how difficult it can be, and show the world that how difficult it can be. Because if you jump into a really great car and you're a competent driver, then you look like a hero. But if you're a two-time world champion, incredible driver, and you get thrown into a bad situation, you can't outdrive the car that you were given.
Yeah. Let's talk about driving fast the car. I mean, yeah, I saw on your social media this year that you were happy because you made you were the part of 250 plus miles per hour club. And how amazing is to drive on an oval on Speedway.
Yeah, no, there's it's a different set of challenges to what you expect racing in Formula One or on road courses. That it's the only way that I could get my head around it was essentially take a high speed corner on a road course. Let's say Copse at Silverstone, the really fast right-hander before Maggots and Beckett's complex. You take that corner and then you do that 4 times, and then you come back. So you're in this loop of doing those same 4 corners. People look at it at IndyCar and ovals and you think, oh, you're just going around in circles. But when you think about challenging corners like Copse and you're doing that 4 times a lap, then that suddenly opens your mind wow, this isn't just going around in circles. It's a really challenging high speed corner where you're on the edge, and you're doing that not once a lap, you're doing it not once every minute and a half, you're doing that every 10 seconds.
Yeah.
So you don't have a lot of time to compose yourself before the next time you have to go through that corner. So I that's how I'd like people in Europe to think about it, is think about a really challenging high speed section of a road course, and then you do that corner 4 times a lap, in under a minute. So that from that perspective, it's a different set of disciplines. Like it's not totally different, but there's a different sort of approach to it, and it's something where you have to be your senses have to be very heightened. You're picking up on the smallest details of what's going on in the car underneath you because you don't have a lot of time to react to it, and you're trying to sense of, okay, can I carry more speed through this corner, or was that the limit? So you're constantly trying to balance that, and at the same time, the consequences are huge on an oval compared to that on a road course. The speed is so high. As you said, this year I was super happy. Like the speed I did was 231.6 average over 10 miles. So we did 4 laps at 231.6, which I don't know what that translates to kilometers. I'm thinking, is it like 400 kilometers, something like that? But it's a lot. That in the history of the 500, that's the 33rd fastest qualifying time in the history in the 100 years. So that I was like pretty excited to have achieved that, and that made me, I was wanting to get a qualifying speed of over 230, and I was able to do it this year, which was cool.
This year's laps were amazing. Were so fast. One day, one of my friends asked me why the Indy 500 is a part of Triple Crown, because I know, he understood that Monaco Grand Prix is a so tight circuit, which shows the talent of the driver, and Le Mans is also tough because it lasts 24 hours. But he asked me why Indy 500 is a part of this. Maybe we should give there some Dakar or I don't know, Daytona. And I told him all these things about one lap, which is not only doing circles to the left. That you must change multiple things during every corner. So I told him how complex is that in race, that you have spotters and other things, and this guy was so shocked because it's true what you said previously. Because in Europe we don't have ovals now. People think that it's turning to the left, and so they are not watching NASCAR. That's an example. But when you know these things that you need to know to understand oval racing, you understand why, for example, Nigel Mansell in 1993, when he was winning in ovals after his championship is in F1, why it was so incredible, why it was a history of the whole motor race. I'm gonna ask you about this year, about this Indy. I didn't saw it this training live when you got injured, but it was a moment when I saw this on social media. Of course, my first thought was, is he okay? I saw the ambulance, so I was really frightened. But also I saw you, and you were showing thumbs up to the publicity, to the viewers. But my question is, how did you really feel after this horrible crash? Was it hurt, or you had so much adrenaline that you didn't feel anything, so after that you felt something?
Yeah, so yeah, it was a bit of a shock, where well, this was the day after qualifying, so at this point we're working solely on the race car. Being in the dirty air and traffic, you're trying to get the car as dialed in as possible to work in those kind of situations, which is different than the qualifying car. Your qualifying car is trimmed out; it's just for speed. So once you switch over to race, you put a lot more downforce on the car. You're trying to make the car work in a big pack. And at that time, we were in a race run simulation. We're about 3 or 4 laps into that, and it was a pretty normal situation for me. There was a car passing another car ahead of me, so I in that situation, you have to ease off because you get an accordion effect where the guy getting past has to lift in order to blend in. So as he's doing that, you're not going to be able to pass him before the corner. So naturally, you have to slow down and blend in with that car. But in this situation, the car behind me didn't lift at all, and then just absolutely wiped me out. So that sent me into the wall. It spun me around. They hit me from the rear. We were already halfway through the corner, so it was really unusual. And that spun me around. I ended up hitting the wall at 190 miles an hour. It was 58 G's impact, which is not like crazy high, but it's high enough. And the big problem was I hit, directly forward, so on the nose. And in that situation, there's just not a lot of crumple zone there to absorb the impact because it needs to be strong to protect the driver's legs. So even though it was 58 G's in the car recorded, the accelerometers in my IndyCar radio set, which in your ears, recorded 55. So my body absorbed 55 G's essentially, or went through 55 G's. So that's quite a lot. That I decelerated 150 miles an hour in like 1.3 seconds. So it was a big impact. And straight away, I knew that I'd hurt something. There was some pain in my back. I was really hoping that it was nothing, but I knew straight away. I was like, I'm pretty sure I've hurt myself here, So I was hoping it was more muscle and that I was gonna, it was gonna be sore, but I could still race. And it was pretty devastating and shocking, really, to get the news that it was as bad as it was. That it was a vertebrae compressed and fractured. So I was a T12 vertebrae, and that's why I'm wearing a brace now. I'm almost 2 months into the recovery, and the prognosis is good. I'll make 100% recovery, and my goal is still to come back and do this again next year.
Okay, so I will pray about your health, okay? Because
Thank you.
It's quite, whoa. I can't even imagine that crash. That's so horrible. I mean, as a person, were you mad after that? You realized that this year is not for you. It ends after qualifying.
Yeah, no, for sure. You spend all year like thinking about this race, preparing for it, getting ready for it, and you're in your mind, you're already envisioning or visualizing, being there at the end of the race and competing for the win, and you have to believe you can win it. So you visualize you can win it, and then when you're told that news, that journey's over, and that dream of winning the Indy 500 is over for this year. So, and at the same time, you never know how many opportunities you're going to get to race in this race. It's not easy to get an opportunity, and to have it sort of taken away in the way it was just frustrating is the only word I can use. I was devastated. Yeah.
Oh.
But like I said, I'm fully focused on coming back next year and doing this again. I'm crazy enough to do it. So I'm in good spirits now and focused on the future.
Okay, maybe we'll find each other on the track. I will be asking drivers
Yeah.
and doing reporting stuff. I mean, your absence had made opportunity to Graham Rahal, who was bumped, to not only to compete. And when I saw his emotions after being bumped, I
Yeah.
realized how important it's for drivers to be to be part of Indy 500 race. You know, it was so sad to watch. I didn't want to watch it because I realized that because he's American, he's so dedicated to racing, to his family. I saw a devastated man, and you know, if we can find any positives in, I don't want to say that in your injury, but if we can find something what was good after that, that was Graham Rahal presence in 500, and it was his first time with Chevy's engine.
That's right.
Yeah, but I want to ask you about some rumors that were in the press about, you know, behind the scenes things, because there were rumors that his racing in your car it happened because you are good friends for a long time, and you were the person who suggested that if I can't race this year, Graham should do that for me. Was it true?
Yeah. I wish I could take credit for it, but no. When those decisions were being made, I was still in the hospital and going through MRI scans and stuff like that. So I wasn't involved in those conversations. You know, it was kind of crazy coincidence because the night before I texted Graham because it was obviously bump day and he'd been knocked out, and texted him and just said, "Hey man, like, you know, just wanted to drop you a message and like, you know, offer my support, and you know, there's obviously a tough day to be, you know, to get bumped, but you'll come back even stronger next year or next time," I think I said.
Yeah.
And I wasn't kind of expecting it to be so quick, you know, but you know, no, I know Graham really well, and he's was someone that really supported Justin's family in you know, time after losing Justin. So it was kind of full circle, and it made a lot. You know, you know, it was someone I was happy to sort of take the drive, but yeah, those decisions just happened from the team side, and everyone got together to make that happen. So I can't take credit for that, really.
Okay, it makes sense because the announcement was pretty soon after your injury.
It was the logical choice. I mean, he'd already, you know, driven the car all week, so you know, he was the logical fit, really. Yeah, so it made sense.
Yeah, I was talking about this with other journalists, and we were talking the same as you said. That was the right choice because no other driver was has made
Ready.
the trainings,
Yeah.
the qualifying. They were not fitting this car. I mean, J.R. Hildebrand or Sage Karam, they were driving, but the year before or something. So it was a logical choice, like Conor Daly in the last race.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not gonna ask you about the last question because I was gonna ask about is the 500 part of tradition of your year. You told me already a lot of stuff about this, and you know, the qualifying is one thing, but when you watch the race, you can see that the 150 laps are pretty strategic moves, pit stops or other stuff, but the last laps and when the race is coming to the end, this is madness. Yeah. How to survive that?
Yeah, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. The first, you know, everyone's goal coming into the race is to survive the first 150 laps and set themselves up for the last 50. And you know, once you get down to those last 50, you've got people that are not in the position they want to be in, and they start getting desperate, you know, and start making these big, crazy moves. So, you know, you've really got to risk, you know, weigh up risk versus reward. And at the same time, you know, certain drivers have certain, what's the word, characteristics, not always good ones. So you know that in a certain situation with a certain driver, it's better to live to fight another day than to take that risk with them. So you have to be weighing it up all the time. It's in the spur of the moment. In the moment, you have to make that decision of, okay, do I risk crashing with this person to fight over this position, or do I live to fight another day and hopefully, you know, later in the race I'll get that position back. And you know, there's no, you know, you've got to make good decisions. It's all happening very fast, and at the same time, a lot of it comes down to the strategy as well. You know, what position that puts you in, you know, as you get down to the closing stages. You know, so there's no, I wish there was an easy answer, like this is how you survive the last 50 laps, but there isn't. You know, it's happening in real time, in the moment, at 230 miles an hour, and you're battling for the biggest prize in motorsport. You know, so there's all kinds of crazy, you know, maneuvers and passing, you know, that happens, and you have to navigate that. I'm probably someone that's a little bit more conservative. I'm gonna try and live to fight another day, because I think that to win it, you've got to be there at the end. You know, as you saw this year, you know, Pato, he went for that move on Marcus, right? You know, with like 10 laps to go. Yeah. It was ended up taking him out of the race, and really in that moment, he was the car that was probably had the biggest shot at winning. You know, he had fresher tires, he had a fast car, and we had two cars ahead of him. So I think in that moment, if he could go back, I'm pretty sure he would choose the other option, which was to ease out of it and get another opportunity to pass. You know, so but it's, you know, you were talking about why is it part of the Triple Crown, and I think it's because it is one of the biggest races in the world. It's one of the oldest races in the world. You know, this being the 107th year running of the Indy 500 this year, and it goes back to the traditions of when it used to be on the Formula One calendar. You know, back in the 60s. You know, when Graham Hill and Jim Clark won this race. That when you have that kind of tradition and that size of a race that's this difficult to win, then yeah, it deserves its place amongst the Triple Crown, and you know, that's what makes it exciting for fans at home to watch it. So definitely recommend to everyone listening in Europe and in Poland to find a way to tune in and watch it, because it's you know, you've got 33 of probably the most competitive people in the world, not just drivers. Like they all want to win that race, and they'll give anything to do it. So, you know, you could have them doing any kind of sport, and it would be entertaining to see how competitive they want it, you know, and how badly they want to win it.
I couldn't imagine better recommendation to IndyCar, and the thing I wanna add to your words and are about Alex Palou, because this year this guy is amazing. There are rumors that he can end in F1 or something, but that's so nice that we are so bored of Max Verstappen winning and winning and winning. This will be his third championship. Let's be honest. But when you have a short domination in IndyCar, it's something what just don't happen there. And I love IndyCar so much because there are so many drivers fighting for the title at Laguna Seca, and when you see so big form of one of the drivers, you are not bored when you are watching the next and next and next race. So it's pretty amazing. And I was searching which year was so dominant by the other driver. I was looking at, I don't know, 2050 and Scott Dixon and Juan Pablo Montoya, but
Yeah.
it wasn't that. So I also recommend all the people to watch IndyCar, because it's pure racing. Obviously, the Formula One is it's a brand. It's all the technicalities and other stuff. But if you're a fan of pure racing, the IndyCar has ovals, road courses, streets, and on the so many places. And if you're looking for good racing and you like open wheels, that's the series you should watch, because it's totally worth it.
Absolutely.
And also it has a big history of former F1 drivers who were competing in this series. I mean, Jim Clark, Jackie Stewart was also present on the 500.
Yep.
It was Indy 500 was a run of Formula One calendar in its first years. So it's definitely worth to watch if some people are fans of motorsport history. It's also the reason to watch this. Okay, thank you very much for talking with me.
No worries. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Okay, thank you very much, because this interview was so I knew new things about IndyCar, about racing, about your career, and thank you to popularizing this amazing series. Thank you for being my guest. I think that was my last question, but have a nice day, and I think we'll stay in touch.
Sounds good. Thanks, Chris. Have a good one.
Okay, bye.